Hi everyone, welcome to another video by the Orchid shelf here in Naples, southern Italy. Today I wanted to present to you one of my favorite plants in my collection, a beautiful Paphiopedilum philippinense alba. And as the name says, this plant actually hails from the Philippines and northern Borneo, as it says on the website orchidspecies.com. It grows over there near the seashore, so basically same level as the sea, up to an elevation of 500 meters, where it's actually still quite warm. 500 meters is not too high, so I'm guessing the temperatures will be still in the 20s in Celsius. And it grows actually on rocks. I don't know whether it grows tendentially on rocks or whether it's also semi-terrestrial or terrestrial, meaning that it grows in the ground and in soil as well. But orchidspecies.com specifies that it's a lithophyte, which means that it grows on rocks. Actually, and more specifically, it grows on limestone, which is actually relevant for the culture tips that I'm about to give you. So stay tuned. Yeah, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that you get regular updates. All right, yeah, let's get into a description of the plant. Well, you can't really ignore this magnificent flush of flowers, can you? This year, the plant has gifted me 3 flower spikes at once, so you see this incredible bloom show here. Since I have to keep this plant in a corner of the orchid shelf on the top level, so it actually doesn't grow here in the mid-level where the light is quite strong. Yeah, because it's in the corner, you see that the flower spikes all have developed into that direction, which is where the light is. So I would love for the plant to actually have flower spikes which are a bit more erect, like this, you know. But the problem is that then I would have to stake the plant and I would have to put 3 stakes into the soil, and I just didn't want to do that. It's cumbersome. B, those stakes, they rot at a certain point and create problems. And C, I just don't think it looks very nice. So like this, it looks a bit more natural, and thanks to the artificial grow lights, the flowers are still growing upwards. So actually that's pretty nice. Yeah, in many languages, actually, this type of orchid, Paphiopedilum, is called lady slipper because of this very, very beautiful but also very special lip. It actually has this beautiful combination of these lid-like sepals, which are pointed here at the end, and these wonderful petals which are a bit twisted. It's really magnificent. If I look at these flowers, what nature can do, and you know, that it's hard to believe that all of this is supposed to be in the genetics of the plant, but it's just so beautiful. Now, if you look up Paphiopedilum philippinensis online, then you will actually notice that the original plant version is brown on the sepals and petals, whereas the lip is yellowish. But this is the so-called alba variety. Alba means white, and this is why it lacks the pigments that actually make the petals and sepals look brown reddish in tone, and this is why you see this whitish and the green color. I got it on purpose because of that, because I really love alba varieties of plants. I heard that some of them create problems sometimes because of the lack of pigments and because they can have some defects, but this plant has been growing insanely well, slow but steady, and it's giving me so much, pleasure and so much. I just feel so grateful for this plant. Yes. All right, let's go through the care requirements one by one, I would say. Yeah, as we can guess from the origin of the plant and the geography where the plant comes from, we're talking about quite a warm tropical area this plant hails from. And that's why I do not give it temperatures below 20 degrees at any time. I mean, I have to admit that, of course, daytime, nighttime, there can be a difference. And I'm guessing that this is actually also good for plants if plants experience a bit of a temperature drop at night. And also during the coolest days in winter, I will have around 18-19 degrees in my room, but I would say that's really the maximum that I would expose this plant to. It might actually stall growth if it gets too cold, and then you have to be quite careful with watering. But yeah, if it's around 20 degrees Celsius and more, of course, then the plant will be fine. In the upwards direction, I haven't really had problems with temperature so far. So even if it gets really hot, so in my room I don't have any climatization, so it might go up to 35 degrees Celsius in my room in summer. The plant is absolutely fine as long as the medium stays moist. And yeah, let me think about what else to say. Yeah, we talked about temperature requirements, warmth, and moisture. Let's talk about moisture. So, as you might guess from the origins of this plant, where the plant grows either by the seashore or at relatively low elevations of up to 500 meters in the Philippines, we're talking about quite a high humidity environment, which not everybody can actually provide at a home here in Europe. And I'm a bit luckier that I live in a seaside town where we continuously have an ambient humidity of around 40 to 50%, sometimes even more, which I guess is good for the plant as well. But not to worry if your ambient humidity is lower than that, because I believe that that's not a problem as long as you keep the plant moist. When it comes to watering, I keep it like any other Paphiopedilum. So I really ensure that the substrate stays moist at all times. So that means that more than a phalaenopsis, where I do wait for the substrate to become almost dry, I would water this plant again when I see maybe that the substrate has got half dry, maybe even. So staying moist or even almost wet is not so much the problem if you provide enough air movement nearby. So maybe if you have a fan running somewhere near the plant that kind of moves the air, very softly. And if you actually keep giving it fresh water, so that's important. So do not let it sit for days in old water, because that water will get stale and anaerobic. So yeah, keep watering it, keep flushing the pot, and that will actually be very good for the plant. And do not be too afraid about getting the plant wet or moist. Yeah, many people are actually worried about getting water into the crown. So here basically when they water, they're very worried about relieving water inside here. I would be worried too if I had no air movement next to the plant, because that means that the water will accumulate here in the core of the fans, in the leaf axils, and then that standing water might actually lead to rot, especially if the plant has a calcium deficiency. That makes the plants become very prone to rot issues. So yeah, if you feel a bit like the air is standing, which I generally do not recommend with orchids, but if you feel like that's the case, then I would always take a tissue and kind of dry off the hearts of the centers of the fans after watering, in case you water from the top. It can in fact be beneficial if you keep the plant indoors to shower the plant every now and then, and by showering I literally mean keep it under your shower head, or your running shower head, for maybe at least 30 seconds to really not only clean out the leaves of the plant, but also flush out the medium, the growth medium of the plant. And you have to remember the fact that fresh water also has oxygen in it, which is why this oxygen will then, not necessarily aerate the substrate, but help keeping it fresh and oxygenated, which is also very important to the plant. Right, let's look a bit at the growth structure. So if you can see, let's have a look at it from the side. So this is one fan, and these fans, after a while, they mature. So one sign of a fan maturing is in fact that it flowers, like it did here. So these fans that flower are mature, and then after flowering, or sometimes when the plant is old enough and has enough energy, then we'll just start producing offshoots. So these are the offshoots, and one fan might have more than one offshoot, so sometimes even 2 and 3, and these will then continue to grow like you see on this side. This plant doesn't have any small offshoots anymore. The smallest one is this one here, and it takes around 2 to 3 years for each fan to mature, and then if you keep it in a happy condition, it might bloom for you. Yeah, so this type of growth pattern is actually called sympodial growth. So monopodial growth means, like a Phalaenopsis orchid, that it will develop only one growth point. So basically only one growth center, so to speak, where all the leaves are coming from, whereas a sympodial orchid will produce multiple new growth points during its lifetime. And in fact, with sympodial orchids, so also with Paphiopedilum orchids, over time the old mature fans will actually decay, so they will dry out. The plant will deliberately take out all of the energy of the fans and then just let them die out, whereas the rest of the plant will live on. So if at any time you see that this plant flowers, gives you this beautiful gift, and then afterwards, one by one, from the outside towards the inside, the leaves will start to get brown, and then eventually you can sort of pull them off. Then that's the plant deciding to get rid of the older fans to focus on growing the newer fans, on this side. Right, and why am I talking about this sympodial growth pattern? Now, whereas I'm generally not too worried about, getting the plant wet and then causing rot issues inside the heart of this plant, because I have enough air movement and I provide enough calcium. I'll talk about that later. What I am worried about sometimes is when actually the offshoots are very, very tiny. So they will start up very tiny and they will come out here on the side. And that's when the leaf centers are quite, the growth points are quite closed off. I've had it with other orchids, not so much with Paphiopedilum, but I'm still very cautious because sometimes water can just sit there without me noticing. They can accumulate within those closed off leaf growth points. And then that offshoot might actually die off out of rot issues. I haven't had that problem yet so far, but be a bit careful when you water it, and just make sure that water doesn't accumulate too much in those tiny growth points, and then you should actually be fine. Right, so we talked about the growth pattern, we talked about watering. So remember, keep it moist so you can see what I mean by moist. So I hope you can see it from the color of the substrate. And here, these are all the roots that have grown over time. It's actually, I will have to repot this plant after the flowering is done because the pot is really, really full with roots. At this point, this plant just grows all the time. The roots grow all the time. A characteristic of Paphiopedilum roots is that they are brown. So don't worry when they're brown. It doesn't mean they rotted. It's just their normal color. And they've got these little hairs alongside the roots. So that's also completely normal, and it's not a sign of mold or any other problem. And if you're lucky, you might actually discover some white root tips. That's also a good sign because it means that the roots are growing. Well, here the substrate is getting too old, so you see a bit of algae accumulating here, and all of this, gunk here probably comes from the fact that the substrate has been degrading. So the bark chips, they're just getting too old, and probably when I unpot the pot, I will see that the bark chips have got quite crumbly, and that's actually not a good thing. But in this substrate mix, I do not have any sphagnum moss. So the sphagnum moss is only on top to keep in a bit the moisture. But actually here I find a mixture of bark chips and ceramis and very fine lava rock. The reason why you find both ceramis and that lava rock there is that I mixed, I believe I used a orchid bark mix from ceramis, which is actually orchid bark with bigger clay pieces, and then I mixed that whole thing with cacti and succulent mix from ceramis, which consists actually only of tiny ceramis pieces and tiny pieces of lava rock. Yeah. The reason why I mixed it so much between, with bark and clay granules or bark and lava rock is that the bark in the beginning does not hold too much moisture, so it has to start degrading in order to become, develop a structure where it holds moisture, but at the same time, ceramis and clay granules and lava rock can save a lot of water while at the same time maintaining porousness and airiness of the substrate. So actually I'm quite pleased and quite satisfied, since you see how much this plant has grown in the pot, and I can feel that it's just way too full. When you feel a bit like the pot, it's giving a lot of resistance when you press it, and it feels like it's about to burst, then definitely you should repot it. In my experience, you can repot Paphiopedilum orchids at any time of the year. I would not do it while it's flowering, just in order not to disturb the plant and not to disturb the growth. But yeah, in theory you could just do it at any time. Right, when it comes to light, there is a difference between so-called strap-leaved Paphiopedilum and mottled leaf Paphiopedilum. So mottled leaf Paphiopedilums will have darker leaves, and they will be, light green mottled on their leaves. And those Paphiopedilums need lower light levels, whereas these called strap-leaved Paphiopedilum tend to be slightly bigger than them. So that's why they say the leaves look as big as straps. This Paphiopedilum philippinense individual is actually rather compact. So Paphiopedilum philippinense is famous for actually becoming a very big plant and developing very long strap-like leaves. But maybe because of the tiny pot that it's in, it hasn't got that big yet. So maybe once I start repotting it and there is much more space in the pot, maybe then the fans will actually get bigger. So strap-leaved Paphiopedilum need a bit more light than mottled leaf Paphiopedilums. So what does that actually mean? So in summer, I put my Paphiopedilums out onto the balcony, and there is a 50% shade cloth. And beginning from around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there will be quite strong sunshine directly shining onto the balcony. Not only does that mean that it gets quite hot on the balcony during the hottest summer days, but also that actually the light levels are very, very high. So 50% shading is actually not that much of a shading for orchids, so that even a Vanda and a highlight Cattleya would be growing alongside this one next to it. So that's actually definitely too much light for a Paphiopedilum. But these strap-leaved Paphiopedilums deal with it quite well, maybe because I don't put them there immediately in the beginning for a couple of weeks. I put them there for a bit, and when it gets too sunny, I will put them back inside, and I would do that a couple of times more so that it can acclimatize to the higher light outside on the balcony. And once it's done so, it stays fine. It doesn't show any burn marks because there is a constant wind on the balcony. But you have to keep it very wet, the substrate, because if it doesn't get the moisture it needs under these very hot and sunny conditions, then it will burn, and that looks actually quite ugly. So if you give this Paphiopedilum the right light, then it will develop leaves that are like apple green in color, and this is approximately how you know that the plant is getting enough light. If it's not getting enough light, then the plant will develop very dark green leaves. When it comes to fertilizing, I give it MSU tap water fertilizer, which is made for water with a lot of limescale in it. And now we have to talk about the fact that this orchid grows on limestone in its original habitat, which means that it prefers a bit of, calcium, a bit of, limescale, maybe even. So a high calcium content in its water. If you live in an area with very soft water with very low levels of limescale and calcium, you can buy CalMag additive fertilizers, which have that calcium in it, and fertilize weekly, so tiny bits every week. Or if you actually live in areas with a lot of very hard water with a lot of limescale in the water, just like here in Naples, what I do is I add a bit of citric acid into the water to lower its pH. And in that process, actually, the chemical reactions will release some calcium that is usable by the plant. And I believe that's also why, it's been growing well for me. It's very healthy. It doesn't cause problems with pests. I had a small thrips infestation in my collection last year, but this plant was unaffected, which made me very happy. And the calcium from the limescale water does seem to help. And occasionally I also give the plant kelp fertilizer and algae extract, but I've been becoming very cautious with that one because depending on which kelp extract you use, it leaves those ugly brown marks on the roots, and it just gets too strong. So I wouldn't overdo it with the kelp extract. The plant will also be entirely fine if you give it normal orchid fertilizer without any kelp extract, but just watch out for that provision of calcium. Yeah. So this is the plant. When it comes to the growth speed, I can't really say that this plant grows slowly. Many people say that Paphiopedilum orchids grow slowly. I mean, a tiny offshoot develops quite fast. What is true, however, is that you can't expect it to flower every year. So sometimes it will skip a year because the fans that it has produced haven't matured. You just have to be patient, provided constant care, and then it will put out this amazing bloom show for you, like it does right now. And yeah, for me, they're very easy to care for. They don't even grow too slow, not as slow as I thought they would. Maybe mottled leaf Paphiopedilum grow slower. I haven't had any yet, but this one is very easy to care for. Just make sure that you keep it moist. Do not be afraid of water. Do not be afraid of keeping it moist. It's not like a phalaenopsis, which wants to dry out a bit more, or like a cattleya, which has to dry out really well, almost completely. This one wants to stay moist. It doesn't mind wetness when it's hot, especially when it's sunny outside, and you can even water it every day if you want to in summer. Yeah. So that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and otherwise we will hear from each other very soon. Thanks for tuning in, and happy orchid growing. Bye.